Holy smokes, Batman. Koreans are super pissed off at Donald Trump right now. Why? Because a couple of days ago, he made a statement that Korea used to be part of China. Korea actually used to be part of China. Nobody knows Korea history like me. Nobody. Oh no. Bro, okay. First of all, I want Korean people to understand that most of the time, actually probably 90% of the time, Americans know very little about Korea. We know very little about Korean history. We know very little about the Korean War. That is because in the American education system, they don't really spend too much time talking about the Korean War because it was right between World War II and right between the Vietnam War. So we don't really learn much. We learn about the war and what happened and how many people died, but we don't learn about your history. So, point one, please, if an American says that you were part of China, just blow it away. Second of all, there has really only been one time in Korean history where Korea was a part of China. Even then, it was just a tributary state. This point in time was from 918 AD until 1897 when Korea became the Empire of Korea, the Korean Empire. Shortly after that, it became annexed by the Japanese, and that lasted until the end of World War II. But technically, is he wrong? I mean, technically, Korea was a tributary state to China for a very long time. So is he wrong with this assumption that Korea was a part of China? Let's go over the history of Korea over the last 2,000 years to kind of grind out this issue. As far back as 108 BC, Chinese emperors had been trying to take over Korea for strategic advantage. In 108 BC, the Han Emperor Wu Di took over northern parts of the Korean peninsula and took control of the Pyongyang area and had administrative control of the Pyongyang area for 400 years. Then the tides turned from 37 BC to 668 AD. The Koreans actually took a large part of Manchuria and Siberia. So you could say, technically, China used to be part of Korea. Now, to understand why there's the assumption that Korea used to be part of Japan, you must understand that technically Korea was a tributary state of China or to China from 918 until 1897. By tributary state, I mean Korea would send gifts, envoys to events in China, things like that, in return for protection. Korea, on the grand scheme of things, even now, is much smaller. But back then, it was much smaller as far as numbers and even firepower. China and Japan were really big powers back then. So Korea really benefited by becoming a tributary state. Hey, you will protect me if I send you gifts, if I send you people, if I send envoys? Sure, you can protect me. During the 13th century, this is kind of when it gets murky. Please keep with me. The Mongolians, the Yuan dynasty, took over China and took over Korea. They used Korea as a land bridge to attack the Japanese. I'm guessing the goal of the Yuan dynasty was to eventually take over Japan, eventually take over everything. Technically, they were Mongolians, but technically also they were the governing body of China. So this is where opinions mix. Technically, Korea and China were under the rule of the Mongolians, but the Mongolian government, the Yuan dynasty, was the governing body of China that was in control of Korea as well. Whether or not you say that the Mongolians were in control of China and Korea, or that the Mongolian Yuan dynasty that was in control of China was in control of Korea, that's up to you. That is kind of where Korea becoming a state or being a part of China mostly gets really mixy, really muddy, and kind of wonky. So, the Mongolians used Korea as a strategic bridge to attack the Japanese, and, well, they failed. The Japanese returned the favor a few centuries later during the Ming Dynasty, when Korea was still a tributary state to China, and attacked mainland China through Korea. So the Ming, in return, in response to the Japanese invasion, sent a force, and the Ming with the Koreans basically pushed and defeated the Japanese out of the Korean peninsula. Enter the Qing. To make things worse, the Manchus take over China. The Manchus take over China, and in 1636, the Manchu government, the Qing dynasty, forces Korea to submit to Chinese authority. Again, this is another part in Korean history where it kind of gets murky. Technically, Korea was standing alone. Technically, Korea had a king, it had governors, it had district leaders, it had all of these things in place, and were technically their own government, but at the same time, the king submitted authority to the Chinese. Does that make it a state? I'm not sure. Historians say that thus far, Korea has never been a part of China. I'm not sure. I'm no historian. It just really depends on what side of the fence you're standing on. In Chinese history, they state that from 918 to 1392, during the Goryeo dynasty, that Korea was a Chinese state. So again, it depends on if you are looking at the Chinese opinion or if you're looking at the Korean and international opinion. In the late 19th century, things get really, really bad for Korea. This is during the Joseon dynasty, and Japan began testing the tributary states of China by attacking them, by invading. One of those was the Korean peninsula again, and once again, war breaks out in Korea between the Japanese and the Chinese. The war ended with China signing an extremely embarrassing treaty with the Japanese, basically handing Korea to the Japanese. There was a brief moment there called the Korean Empire from 1897 until 1910. This ended with the Japanese annexation of Korea. The Japanese annexation of Korea gave Japan a perfect, wide open door to invade Manchuria, to invade mainland China. And, well, I mean, they were successful in. Japan took over a huge amount of land, a huge amount of territory during World War II. Although Korea should have been a unified entity after World War II, instead it was split in half due to political reasons because Russia was already there. And in fact, we weren't sure that World War II was going to be ending anyways, and we were working with the Soviets to push the Japanese out of the Korean peninsula, to push the Japanese out of Manchuria, and Russia and the Soviet Union was already there. They were already basically in Korea. They were already there, and we were going to meet them to push the Japanese back. After a couple of years, and the Soviet Union and the US pull out of the Korean peninsula, the North and the South go to war. The Korean War was a mess. It began with a divided Korea, and it ended with a divided Korea. Korea, in general, has been in this current situation as the shrimp for thousands of years. What is making Koreans so mad is that Trump has this diarrhea of the mouth going on, and he just says whatever comes to mind, and I don't know if he thinks that it was funny, or that Xi Jinping told him to say it, or that Xi Jinping told him that Korea used to be Chinese land. It's something that he should have worded differently. Obviously, he can't take back his words, but the Korean government, the Korean people are looking on to the United States now more than ever right now, because of the current situation with North Korea, with the current situation with China and Russia, and the fear that Korean War II is going to break out at any moment. And this historically inaccurate statement from Trump about Korea being part of China does nothing to help with the bonding of the alliance between the United States and Korea. And if anything, it put a tear in that relationship. It put a tear in the public view, the public opinion of Trump and basically the United States of America. Koreans are very sensitive about this issue because they have been putting up with being the shrimp for way too long. They have been the shrimp between two whales for over 2,000 years. And now, here we are in 2017, and Donald Trump, the President of the United States of America, South Korea's strongest ally, is making this sharp, inaccurate remark. It is really angering for the Korean people to hear those sharp, inaccurate words come from the President of the United States. And I really hope that Koreans understand that most of us, or any of us that know anything about Korean history, please understand that we don't think that way. I'm not defending Trump, but I will say that if given any lesson about Korean history and about it being a tributary state, he may have taken that out of context and assumed that Korea was part of China. Anyways, thanks for watching. I hope you understand why this sensitive issue is so offensive to the Korean people, and don't just say, it's because they're Asian and because they're all Chinese. Do not think that way. They're completely different people. We as Americans get just as mad whenever we get called Canadians. Thanks for watching.